there everyone. I just wanted to make another video about our current unit, which is Unit 2. We're learning about geometry, so shapes. The nice thing about this is that this unit is very heavily vocabulary based, so it's not as much necessarily working with computing numbers, but more so memorizing important vocabulary that has to do with shapes. There will be some word problems on the test, so I would continue to work on those at home. But these are some things that I suggest that you work on this time around at home to prepare your child for the test, which I believe will be on October 26th. So we're learning about 2D and 3D shapes this unit, and a 2D shape is also known as a plane figure. So whenever I explain this to the kids, I say, it's just plain, it's flat, there's nothing exciting about it, it's pretty plain. We also say how in order to use a 2D shape, you could maybe make a paper airplane out of it, whereas a 3D shape, you could not make an airplane out of that. So anything that kind of helps them to remember that a 2D shape is plane, that would be great. The only 2D shapes that we're learning about is a square, a rectangle, and a circle. So those are the only ones that your child needs to know for the test. Whenever we talk about 3D shapes, we're talking about solid figures. And I always try to explain to the students, whenever we talk about a plane figure, it's so plain because it's flat. A solid figure, if I were to throw that, it would probably hurt because it's pretty solid. It actually takes up space. And we're learning the equivalents. So a square, we're learning the 3D equivalent is a cube, a rectangle, rectangular prism, and then a circle, sphere. So along with these, there's important vocabulary words that your child will need to know on the test, and they're going to need to know how to identify those things. So whenever we're looking at 2D shapes, we're looking at the words side, right angle, and a vertex. So with a 2D shape, a side and a right angle are only specific to 2D. A vertex is actually going to be in a 3D shape as well. So whenever you're talking about the side of a shape, that's just talking about the straight lines that make up the border. So for a square, we have 1 straight line, 2 straight lines, 3 straight lines, 4 straight lines that makes up a square. Same to do with a rectangle, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, a circle has no sides because there's no straight lines. So it's really important to remember that whenever we're talking about side, that the lines have to be straight. Whenever we talk about a right angle, this is probably the most difficult part for the kids to understand the angle. We want them to understand that it's kind of this space right here. Now, saying that it would measure 90 degrees doesn't make sense to them because they haven't learned about actual angles and sizes and measuring. So we try to tell them that if we make an L, anytime that we have an angle that's right, it will complete it and make a square. I also say to kids, if you have a piece of paper that you want to use and you want to put it into a right angle, it should fit perfectly, and you should be able to see both parts. So if I were to have a shape that was a trapezoid, and I were to put my paper in there with my perfect L square, it wouldn't show me both parts. It doesn't fit perfectly like it does up here with my rectangle. So that one's probably the one that I would suggest working on most with the kids, just because it's really confusing for them. And then the last one is a vertex, and a vertex is a fancy word for corner. So understanding that a square has 1, 2, 3, 4 corners, same with a rectangle. Circle, once again, has 0. Anytime that we think about a circle or a sphere, it has 0 sides, 0 edges, 0 vertices. Anytime that we talk about a circle, it's going to be 0. Just like a circle is a big 0. So moving down to 3D, there's 3 words that we want to talk about, and that is the words edge, face, and vertex. So remember, vertex is the same thing as up top, the corners, and vertices is the plural. So if we're talking about one corner, it's a vertex. If we're talking about more than one, it's a vertice. So an edge we want to talk about is where 2 faces meet. So I actually have some shapes here that we use during class. So whenever we're talking about an edge, we're talking about these. So basically equivalent to the sides of a 2D shape, the straight parts that make up the 3D shape. So this shape here would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then on the bottom, 9, 10, 11, 12. This would have 12 edges. Same thing with the rectangular prism. It's the exact same. There's 4 on top, 4 on the bottom, and 4 on the sides. So just letting your kids kind of practice counting those would be very beneficial. Whenever we talk about a face, A face is the 2D shape that makes up the solid figure. So remember that this is solid. If I threw it, it would hurt because it's pretty solid. This is a face. This is a face. This is a face. And all of the faces on this cube are a square. So whenever we look at a rectangular prism, some of the faces are square, some of the faces are rectangles. We're just looking at those 2D shapes that make up the figure. And the kids always laugh, but a good way to remember that is thinking of a slap in the face. I can slap the face of the shape. I can't slap the edge, but I can slap the face because it's the flat part that allows me to actually put my hand on it. Whenever we're thinking about counting faces, we always try to remind the kids to keep it kind of in one spot because if they practice moving it, they'll double count. So you kind of want them to just say, okay, I'm going to sit this on the table and I'm not going to move it. I have a top 1, bottom is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Same thing with the cube. Leave it on the table. I don't want to move it to double count. I have the top 1, bottom 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, coming back to a sphere, we remember that a face is the flat 2D shape. If there was anything flat, this would not be able to roll. And because it rolls, that means that it does not have any faces. So there's no faces on here, because in order to have a face there, I would need to be able to slap something flat, and I can't do that. So then, coming to the vertexes, or the vertices, that's the corners once again. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on the bottom I have 4 more. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so one last thing I'm going to show you is whenever the kids are looking at a 3D shape on paper, it's counting it is a little bit different because they can't physically touch each of the sides. So I have one of our papers that we've used during class, and I'm just going to kind of show you how I expect students to use a highlighter on their test to kind of help them. So whenever we're counting the faces, or the edges, whenever we're counting the edges, the students are expected to use a highlighter, and I think that this really helps as long as the kids know how to do it. We've been going over in class, but it wouldn't hurt to do it at home. You can pull 3D shapes up anywhere on Google Images or whatever. So we remember that there's nothing ever on a sphere. It's a big old 0, same with the circle. If I were to count how many edges a cube has, I would count as I highlight each straight line. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've counted 12 times that I've picked up and put down my highlighter, and I've covered the entire shape. Same thing with the rectangular prism. I'll show you again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you want to make sure that you're getting that entire shape covered with the highlighter. So if the kids are tracing and then they accidentally leave this line blank, just remind them the whole shape has to be covered. So with the cube and the rectangular prism, the nice thing about it is they both have the same amount of faces, edges, and vertices. The only thing that's different is a cube has all square faces, where a rectangular prism has 2 square faces, and then the other 4 are rectangular. So I tried to tell the kids, if you have to count the faces and the edges and the vertices, they're all the same, because it's like I took this cube and I stretched it out to make this. If I were to take this and push it together and squeeze it together, it would be the same shape as this. So I hope that that kind of helped you vocabulary-wise for what you are expected for your kids to know on the test, and I hope that I was able to help a little bit. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.